The Kingdom of the City of Ur. Since I made for my album Osiris Rising this background music you are hearing, I thought I would make also a podcast with an ancient history teaching about the city of Ur, which is mentioned in my occult and ancient civilization inspired trilogy of albums on the first album called Osiris Rising, which you can find on my YouTube channel under youtube.com/Ajahn Spencer. So, the city of Ur. Ur was a major Mesopotamian city of the Kingdom of Mesopotamia, which was, of course, one of the first, if not the first, I believe not the first, but perhaps the first advanced civilization with all the marks of an advanced civilization in recorded human history. That doesn't mean it was the first, it's just the first recorded. And today its location is marked by Tel El-Muqayyar in southern Iraq. The city of Ur was founded sometime around 3,800 years before Christ. And it's founded to be recorded in written history at the earliest point sometime 2,600 years before Christ, so the 26th century BC. It had a patron god called Nana, which coincidentally is what I call my grandma, who passed away so long ago, God bless her. And Nana was the god of the moon, the goddess or god of the moon. Yeah, I would say goddess, ending in A, knowing what I know about searching the origins of languages and etymology and semantics. The A ending tells me it would be a female moon god. And the city, the name of Ur as a city actually means the dwelling place or the abode of Nana. Yeah. And in this place where Ur was once a great city, kingdom, was because Mesopotamia was a city-state empire. So it was a kingdom as well as a city. They found cuneiform tablets in the area and other places which revealed that the city of Ur during the 3rd millennium BC, so 3,000 years before Christ, was a very well-developed state which had its own bureaucratic system. It was wealthy with trade, and it was extremely centralized and organized. And after architects discovered the royal tombs, which they dated somewhere around 2,500 years before Christ, these tombs showed that the area of where the city of Ur had once existed had many luxury items, a lot of them made out of precious metals and a lot of semi-precious stones. Many of these stones would have required importation, which indicates that trade routes were in existence. And many historians, archaeologists and anthropologists make an educated guess that the city of Ur was probably the largest city in the world between 2030 BC to 1980 BC, and probably had a population of about 65,000 people, which is a heck of a lot considering the population of the world and that continent at that time. One of the most notable edifices which was discovered and found out about and should have perhaps been one of the wonders of the world, was of course the Ziggurat of Ur, which was a temple. And the Ziggurat of Ur was built assumedly in the 21st century BC, so 2,100 years before Christ. And apparently, according to translated records, was constructed during the reign of King Ur-Nammu and was reconstructed once again, so what would you say, refurbished 6 centuries before Christ, in the 6th century BC, by King Nabonidus, who was the last king of Babylon. Yeah. So Mesopotamia, this came after Sumeria, because Babylon, of course, was part of the fall of Sumeria. Was the last king of Babylon, Nabonidus, yeah, in the city of Ur. And he refurbished the Ziggurat of Ur in the 6th century BC. Yeah. And the ruins of the Ziggurat, which remain, have been measured to cover an area of 3,900 feet by 2,600 feet, which is massive, and probably bigger than the Cheops Pyramid, maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure. And they were uncovered sometime around the 1930s by archaeologists, and it's assumed to have been part of a temple complex with many other shrines and temples, and that this served as a religious center to administrate the religion for the city of Ur and from the city of Ur, and that this Ziggurat of Ur, the main Ziggurat, was also dedicated to the goddess or god of the city, Nanna, the moon god. As always, it is amazing to behold what kind of edifices and megalithic constructions the ancient civilizations were able to make, which modern engineers to this day can still not explain, because they can hardly make them, if at all, using even their hydraulic cranes and supersized industrial vehicles and lifting equipment. The methods used to construct these edifices is still a mystery to archaeologists and construction engineers around the world to this very day. As to the control and administration, or the rule and governance of the kingdom of Ur, it is known that between the 24th and 22nd century BC, that the kingdom of Ur was controlled by Sargon, or Sargon the Great of the Akkadian Empire, Sargon of Akkadia. Yeah. And after the fall of this empire, the kingdom of Ur was ruled by the barbarian Gutians, although Sargon had successors, until King Ur-Nammu came to power in about 2,047 years before Christ to 2,030 years before Christ was the time of his reign, which was the third dynasty of Ur. King Shulgi succeeded King Ur-Nammu and was able to increment the power of the kingdom of Ur through creating a very, very bureaucratic and centralized administration-based state. King Shulgi, over time, decided he got a bit arrogant and declared himself a god. And he ruled between the years 2029 before Christ to 1982 before Christ, according to documentation, and was well known in recordings of all generations after, for about 2,000 years, was held as a well-known character. As to the great King Sargon of Akkad, to go backwards slightly, who was known as Sargon the Great, he was the first ruler of the Akkadian Empire, and he was well known for his conquests of the Sumerian city-states, which was why this came to be part of the fall of the Sumerian civilization. And this happened during 2,400 to 2,300 years before Christ. The great Sargon of Akkad is sometimes known as the first person in recorded history to ever have ruled over an empire, which I would disagree with, because I would say King Hammurabi was perhaps the first of Sumeria. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure which. I would have to study the dates which came first. I would say Hammurabi. And that Sargon of Akkad was the founder of the Sargonic, or the ancient Akkadian dynasty, which ruled for about a century after his death, until the Gutian conquest of Sumer, or Sumeria. The list of the Sumerian kings makes him, or hails him as the cupbearer to King Ur-Zababa of Kish. But there is also a confusion, because there was another king, Sargon I, who was a later king of the old Assyrian Empire. The empire of Sargon of Akkad is thought to have enclosed Mesopotamia, some parts of the Kingdom of Levant, and also made some military incursions into the Hurrite area and the Elamite territories, which is not yet identified archaeologically, but apparently he ruled these areas from his capital, Akkad, also known as Agade. It is said thereafter that three more kings, Amarsin, Shuosin, and Ibisin, ruled the kingdom of Ur before it fell to the Elamites in 1940 BC. Despite the fact that Ur lost its political power during this time, it still remained very important on an economic level, and it was ruled by the first dynasty of Babylonia, or Babylon, which was then part of the Sealand dynasty, which I will talk about another day, which was then by the Kassites, and before falling to the Assyrian Empire during the 10th to 7th century BE, BC, before Christ. And after the 7th century before Christ, it was then ruled by the Chaldean dynasty of Babylon. The final decline of this kingdom began around 550 years before Christ and became uninhabited by 500 years before Christ. It is believed by anthropologists and archaeologists and other kinds of social scientists that the final decline was most probably caused by drought and the changing river patterns through the silting of the Persian Gulf, which is a process that has been continuing ever since the Gulf existed. So I shall continue to record stories about ancient history and go back into Sumer, Göbekli Tepe, in the time of the hunter-gatherers, and continue telling you about ancient Babylon, Sumer, Assyria, the rise of human civilization, and go even further back before that in some vlogs and documentaries I make, in order to trace back the origins of human language, human behavior, what makes us human, And on a paleontological basis, and evolutionary basis, what made us human and how we became human. And also to talk about the 5 types of humans that once walked upon the planet, of which only one type remain, us, Homo sapiens with a little bit of Neanderthal. Ajahn Spencer, at this time, with my Ancient History series, signing off. You can hear my instrumental soundtrack, The Kingdom of Ur, from the album Osiris Rising, also on my YouTube channel, without this bothersome narrative, which, despite being bothersome, is very educative if you're interested in ancient civilizations, anthropology, archaeology, and the mysteries of the ancient past.